All right, today we're diving into a book that some people call the greatest novel ever written in English, George Eliot's Middlemarch. But here's the thing, it's not a story about epic heroes or dastardly villains. Nope. It's about something much, much closer to home. And honestly, something that might feel a lot more relevant to our own lives.
So, what if the most important lives are the ones we never hear about? I mean, just think about that for a second. This single question is really at the heart of the entire novel. Forget the big names in the history books for a minute. What if the real engine of progress, the actual source of goodness in the world, comes from the quiet, totally uncelebrated lives of ordinary people? That's the kind of radical idea George Eliot is asking us to think of.
So just to be clear, if you're picking this up hoping for big dramatic plot twists or epic battles, this probably isn't the book for you. Instead, what George Eliot gives us it's like a psychological microscope. She just zooms right in on the hopes, the failures, the little moral struggles of people in a small town. And by doing that, she ends up revealing something that's totally universal, something that applies to every single one of us.
Okay, first up, a study of ordinary life. So to really get what Eliot is doing here, we've got to understand the world her characters are living in. So let's go. Welcome to Middlemarch, a town that's right on the brink of some major changes.
So let's set the scene. We're in England between 1829 and 1832. Now, you don't need to be a history buff, but what's important to know is that this is right before a huge political change called the Great Reform Act. And even though politics is mostly in the background of the story, this feeling of transition is absolutely crucial. You've got these new scientific ideas popping up, new kinds of jobs, new ambitions, and all of it is starting to chip away at that old, super rigid social structure.
And here's what's so brilliant. The way Eliot writes it, the town of Middlemarch isn't just a backdrop, it's really a character in its own right. It's this living, breathing system, this giant interconnected web of marriage, money, reputation, and of course, gossip. Who you marry, how much money you have, none of it happens in a vacuum. Every single choice you make sends these little ripples out across the entire community.
So you might be asking, why write a book like this? What's the point? Well, that brings us right to our second section, the author's moral vision, and why George Eliot truly believed that reading a novel could actually change you as a person. But first, a quick word about the author herself. George Eliot was actually the pen name for Mary Ann Evans, who was, no exaggeration, one of the most brilliant minds of the Victorian era. And she chose a man's name for a very practical, very strategic reason. She wanted her ideas, which were really serious and complex, to be judged on their own merit. She didn't want people dismissing her work just because she was a woman, which sadly happened all the time back then.
And this really gets us to her core philosophy. For Eliot, the single most important human quality was sympathy. And this is a huge but, she didn't just mean feeling sorry for someone. Not at all. For her, sympathy was the active, sometimes really difficult work of truly imagining what it's like to be somebody else, to see from their perspective, understand their blind spots, feel their secret hopes. So, in her view, reading a novel wasn't just entertainment. It was like a moral workout. It was training you to become a more empathetic, more compassionate human being.
All right, let's see how this whole moral vision actually plays out in the story. Section 3, 2 idealists, 2 failures. We're going to look at how even the most noble intentions can go completely sideways by focusing on the 2 main characters. Their stories run side by side, and they really are the heart of this novel.
Okay, first up, let's meet Dorothea Brooke. She is so smart, so passionate, and just absolutely desperate to do something meaningful with her life. She couldn't care less about fancy clothes or high society parties. Now, she wants to be part of some great intellectual project, some big social cause. The only problem? She's young, and she's incredibly naive about how the world actually works.
And that inexperience, it leads her straight into a totally disastrous marriage with this much older scholar, Mr. Casaubon. See, she looks at him and thinks, this is my ticket to a life of the mind, I'll be his partner in this amazing intellectual project, but he's not looking for a partner, he just wants, well, an admiring assistant. Her incredible moral energy just gets completely smothered by his deep-seated insecurity and his cold, closed-off personality.
Okay, now let's meet Dorothea's counterpart, Tertius Lydgate. He's this ambitious, brilliant young doctor who shows up in Middlemarch just bursting with scientific idealism. He's got big plans, he wants to do groundbreaking research, and he wants to completely overhaul the town's old-fashioned, backward medical practices. You can almost think of him as Dorothea's scientific twin.
But just like Dorothea, Lydgate makes an absolutely catastrophic choice in marriage. He gets completely swept away by the beautiful Rosamund Vincy, and he kind of naively believes that their love story can fit perfectly alongside his lofty scientific goals. He could not be more wrong. For Rosamund, marriage has nothing to do with ideals. It's a ticket to social status and a comfortable, luxurious life. The second money gets tight, her relentless self-interest becomes this dead weight, this anchor that just drags all of his dreams right down to the bottom.
And this is so crucial. Both Dorothea and Lydgate start out with such noble goals, right? They genuinely want to make the world a better place. But what Eliot is showing us is that idealism, on its own, is just not enough. If you don't have self-awareness, if you can't truly understand other people, and if you don't know how to handle all the pressures of society, well, even the very best intentions can lead you straight to failure.
So this leads us to zoom out a bit for our fourth section, the web of society. Because this isn't just about individual mistakes. It's about all these powerful, often invisible forces that are constantly shaping our lives.
So these are some of the big forces Eliot really puts under her microscope. She looks at the illusion of romance, showing how our fantasies about love can totally blind us to reality. She examines the moral force of money, how it's not just cash, but this thing that can quietly test and corrupt our values. And this one is huge. She redefines egoism. For her, it's not just being selfish, it's a failure of imagination. It's the simple inability to see the world from anyone else's point of view.
And really, at the center of this whole web is marriage. Eliot does not treat marriage like the happily ever after at the end of a story. For her, it's the ultimate moral test. It's the main stage where that idea of sympathy is either nurtured or completely destroyed. A good marriage helps you grow, it's built on respect. But a bad one? Well, as we've already seen with our two couples, it just becomes a prison built from ego and misunderstanding.
Okay, so after all of this struggle, all this failure, where does that leave us? Let's get into our final section, the legacy of goodness. Because the ending of this book is quiet and, honestly, pretty unconventional, but it packs a powerful message.
Yeah, if you're waiting for that big, heroic finale, you're not going to get it. Eliot deliberately refuses to give us that kind of easy satisfaction. Dorothea's huge ambitions to reform the world, they shrink down to the scale of her own family. Lydgate's dreams of revolutionizing medicine, they just kind of fade away into a successful but pretty uninspired career. And at first glance, it really feels like failure. But Eliot is making a much, much deeper point here.
And that deeper point is captured perfectly in the novel's famous final lines. What Eliot is arguing here is that progress, the growing good of the world, it doesn't just come from famous heroes and historic events. It's built on the foundation of countless, invisible, unhistoric acts of goodness by ordinary people. People who lived good lives and were eventually forgotten. So Dorothea's goodness doesn't end up being this giant river that changes the course of history. Instead, it's like thousands of smaller, hidden streams that feed into the world and make it better in ways we can't even see.
So, the big question. Why does any of this matter today? I mean, we live in a world that is completely obsessed with fame, with making a huge impact, with changing the world in some big, visible way. So why should we care about a 150-year-old book about quiet, ordinary lives?
Well, because Middlemarch is like a powerful antidote to all that modern anxiety. It gently suggests that a meaningful life doesn't have to be a famous one. The reason this book has lasted so long is that it doesn't give us easy answers or simple solutions. It gives us something way more valuable. A deep, compassionate understanding of just how messy, complicated, and beautiful human life really is. It trains us in that skill of sympathy. And that, right there, is a lesson that will never, ever get old.